Driving down forgotten back roads that lead to hidden places with dark secrets. Ghost towns that seem to be empty and abandoned, but something still stirs there. Finding yourself in a graveyard at dusk, where the residents are no longer resting in peace. These are places under a dark veil, a shadow if you will. In this shadow, strange visions and whispers beckon. Superstition takes hold. Step into the Black Cat's shadow.
Traditionally, the monsters we know have been ugly, have had sharp teeth and claws and scars and warts and all those kind of things that you just instinctively knew to be afraid of.
But in reality, sometimes monsters can be handsome, charismatic, and even friendly, like our good friend Ted Bundy.
Exactly. That is the topic of conversation tonight on the Black Cat Shadow. Welcome back. I am one of your hosts, Andy. And
I'm I'm Dakota.
Yeah, so we are continuing our serial killer series on this episode, and we're talking about Ted Bundy. And as most of you know, there is a new documentary out on Netflix called Conversations with the Killer, the Ted Bundy Tapes. And yeah, we're just going to have a conversation about that, see what we thought of the documentary. Well, just kind of discuss the documentary and kind of what we learned from it. And, but yeah.
So what you're saying is we're going to have a conversation about a conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. One thing I've noticed, like, I'm just kind of go into some general conversation about some of the things I noticed about some feedback that I've seen. So like on YouTube, I've been posting up all of our episodes on YouTube, and I noticed that our road trip to horror episodes are really popular. They're like one of our most popular types of episodes. So we need to get back to doing that. I think our road trip to Texas episode was it's like our most popular so far. And
I think a lot of that though is because of Dave.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he is just so into it. Everything he does, I guarantee you he's got such a network down there in Texas that it's kind of expanded. But I noticed a lot of people, like when I mention the podcast to people and they ask like what kind of things we do, and I talk about like we do like our Mythos Macabre, and then I mentioned the road trip to horror. They're like, "Oh, when are you going to do Kansas and Missouri?" I'm like, "Well, we're getting to it. We decided to kind of stay away from our local states and work around. We've already got to Texas, and that hits a third of our show. With Dave being from Texas,
Yeah, so I think it's time that we brought it home. I guess you still want to say. I think it's time that we did like start talking about Kansas and Missouri, because I think a lot of people don't realize all the weird stuff that happens in Kansas and Missouri. We have, me and Dakota were just talking yesterday. We were wanting to start talking. There's one local legend we want to start talking about. It's Stoll, Kansas, and if you guys don't know about that, it's like a little small town with a cemetery that has a lot of legends and stuff based around it. So, but
if people are familiar with the Kansas Jayhawks, it's actually pretty close to Lawrence. Matter of fact, it's like 10 minutes from Lawrence, and it is pretty interesting. Matter of fact, the show Supernatural, if you know the boys from Supernatural are, from Kansas. They're actually from Lawrence, and in one of the seasons, it comes roundabout that they actually end up going to Stoll Cemetery, which is supposedly one of the 9 gateways to hell.
Yeah, so that's just a little preview for you guys. We're going to be here pretty soon we'll do a road trip to horror Kansas episode. So stay tuned for that. We're looking forward to that. Actually, I was inspired to start exploring some of our local legends because I was watching this documentary series on Amazon Prime. It's called Hellier. And, it's like about like these people that, it's like a paranormal investigation team, and they go to Kentucky where they got this email from this guy saying that his family was being terrorized by what appeared to be these little goblins that were coming out of like caves in their property. And so just watching through that series, they're talking about how, this little town of Hellier, Kentucky had all these different like weird things that happen, and talking about how maybe this show will inspire other people to explore the legends around them. So that kind of got me thinking about ours and what's around us, and that brought me to Still. So that definitely so I'm definitely excited to dig into that and see kind of what the story is behind all that. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. We're gonna have that as a feature episode here real soon.
Well, I'm actually really excited about that too. And I want to throw this out there, just an idea to the listeners, and if they like it, just send us some feedback on it. If you would like us to, for our local legends between Missouri, Kansas, if you'd like us to do video, post it to YouTube. We have a mutual friend here that's local, Hayden Zeke. He was on one of our episodes. He's a great director and great filmographer. If you guys want to see some actual videos of us visiting some of these locations, we could try to make that work if you guys want to see it.
Hey, yeah, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, so we can, so stay tuned for all that. That's coming up. But tonight we are talking about Ted Bundy. Yeah, so, Dakota, I don't know if you had like researched much about Ted Bundy before this documentary come on Netflix, but I know I hadn't. So this was kind of, I had watched one of those movies. I think it was called Bundy. It was based on Ted Bundy's life. It came out probably like in the early 2000s, I think. I've seen that movie, but other than that, I hadn't really like studied about Ted Bundy at all, or really like read about what he did or about his life or anything like that. So this is kind of like a new experience for me. What about you?
I mean, I've heard of Ted Bundy before. I think I was 13 the first time I ever heard about him, and I started doing my own little research about it when I started getting into high school, and I had a fascination with serial killers already. So I mean, at that point, it kind of died off because it kind of got weird for me. People started asking why I was doing it, and they started associating me with that type of that profile. You know what I mean? So at that point, it kind of stopped. And then when I started getting into more of the horror scene, and when me and you started talking and doing the podcast, I started seeing more about Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Ed Gein. And to me, Ted Bundy stuck out more, and I did a little bit more research than I really felt comfortable with again. So it kind of died off here like last year, and then now we kind of struck up this conversation again. So yeah, no, it's one of those topics. It falls into like true crime, and so and then that's a really hot topic right now. People are really into that kind of stuff, and I'm trying to figure out what the fascination is with serial killers and thing. And I think it's just like it's like a horror movie, but in real life. It's something that really happened. Not that I don't want to say that serial killers are fascinating because they're it's horrible what they've done, but I think people are kind of interested in like hearing about what happened and just hearing about the cases and things like that. So yeah, so like I said, this documentary just recently came out on Netflix, and so I didn't really know too much about Ted Bundy, so I sat down and watched it pretty much over like the course of one evening. Like I just finished it up yesterday, like the last few minutes of the last episode, but there's like 4 episodes, and there's 4 episodes.
Yeah, so there's like 4 episodes. They're about an hour long. So it takes a while. It does take a while to get through, but if you just sit and like you could spend like 4 hours. You could like knock out the whole series like in one setting. So that's pretty much what I did, and it went by pretty quick because it was fascinating to hear just the story of Ted Bundy, and I know that there's some people that have a negative view of this documentary because it does focus so much on Ted Bundy himself, and it doesn't really talk about his victims that much. But I mean, overall, like when the documentary starts off, they're kind of introducing you to Ted Bundy, and from what it sounds like he was a guy that everybody liked. He was a guy that fit in, but as we kind of go on, we kind of find out that he was somebody that kind of created a persona that he used to fit into whatever situation that he was in. And it sounds like, from what he says, that he had a pretty pleasant childhood, that there wasn't really any abuse. But I think later on, they kind of speculate, well, there might have been actually some abuse, because I think, Ted Bundy, he just, whenever he talked about himself, he saw everything through rose-colored glasses. And so you really don't know what the actual truth is with his background. Another thing that I noticed was it's interesting that how during the 70s, that's when we had kind of our peak with serial killers, with John Wayne Gacy, with Ted Bundy. That's when Son of Sam, that's when some of the most infamous killers were active. And I wonder why that is. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dakota?
Well, I'm going to actually attribute that to the media. Look what we had in the 60s with Vietnam. It was the publicized war. It was the war that everyone saw. Now, the media became ultra popular with the moderate and the left. Not trying to make it political, but it was, because they wanted to show everyone, and that's a good thing. It is. And they wanted to show everyone what was going on, what was happening, and people took it the way they wanted to. So what we saw the media, we saw the press pick up on everything that they could find. So we started learning about these things more. So I'm not saying that there wasn't serial killers before, because I guarantee you there were serial killers dating back to the 1800s. But they weren't serial killers because they weren't classified as that until after this time, and even said it in the documentary that serial killer wasn't a phrase or a term that was thrown around. It wasn't actually used till maybe the 80s. And look at some of the names though that they get. It was the media. It wasn't the people. It wasn't just normal people like me and you. Not saying we're normal, because we're not. We like horror movies, guys. But it's the media that gave these monsters names, and that kind of what spurred it on. I mean, look at what we have now with shows like Criminal Minds, where the serial killer is feeding on the attention from the media. And I'm pretty sure that's how Ted Bundy was in the 70s, because he was like, hey, I did these things, and it's kind of feeding my ego a little bit. It's making me want to do this more. So I think we can attribute a lot of because of the rise of media in the 60s and 70s.
So everything kind of kicks off here so Ted Bundy was in the Seattle area. It starts off, there's a series of missing women in the area. And it was really frightening, because these women just started going missing for no reason, and they never, they weren't finding them. And so it was just a really scary time for women, everybody was just looking over their shoulder. So, but I think when police got a lead was when there was two women that went missing on the same day, and they had both went to this lake festival, like at a local lake there in the Seattle area. And there was some witnesses that they saw them both talking to a guy named Ted. And so that kind of gave them their first lead. It's like, hey, there's this guy named Ted we need to be looking for. And also, I think somebody also saw his car. It was a brown VW Bug. So they were kind of looking for those two things. And well, and I should say the whole basis of this documentary was the fact that these two journalists had made a deal with Ted Bundy that if they would kind of start reinvestigating his case to prove his innocence, then he would do an interview with the other journalist to kind of get his story, I guess, or whatever. So the one journalist, he went into the prison to interview Ted. The other one went back out west to reinvestigate his case. And Ted was in prison in Florida, so he was on the East Coast. But whenever they started the interview, like, it's interesting because Ted doesn't really want to talk about the crimes. He doesn't want to talk about any of the murders because he actually maintains his innocence, like at the beginning, but he wants to clear his name. And so they had to try to figure out how to get him to start talking about this stuff. You know, how to start getting him to talk about the murders. And, you know, they came up with the idea of, how about we get him to talk about the murders in third person? You know, like, what would this person do, or how would this person be thinking because of Ted's background in psychology? I guess he went to school for and got a degree in psychology, I think. So that's how they got him talking, was like, okay, Ted, what do you think this person's motivations were psychologically? And so then Ted basically started describing like why he did it, you know, like he started describing like his motivations for it and what he did, but in third person. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the most interesting parts about the whole documentary was the fact that they had these tapes. And I mean, obviously, it's eerie. It's just eerie hearing this man's voice, you know, almost like it's coming from the grave. I mean, when actually was he executed? Spoiler alert, he was executed.
It was like 89, I want to say, or was it early 90 maybe? No, I don't remember now.
I think it might have been the late 80s. I don't remember for certain, but I mean, that's way before my time, and I mean that's a smack dab like right in the middle of your time, I think, right, Andy?
Yeah, like 89, I was like 11 then.
Okay, so yeah, I mean that's smack dab like right in the middle of your time.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, you were 11 years old. You probably didn't know what was going on. You probably didn't know who he was.
No, I don't even remember seeing it on the news. But you know, watching this documentary, it seemed like it was a big media type event. But I don't remember like my family watching it or anything like that. So maybe my family just wasn't interested in it at the time.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, who would really want to be interested in that at the time? Especially, I mean, between the 70s and the 90s, it was a really conservative time for families, at least. Families were really conservative. They didn't want to expose their kids and their families to all these things that were going on. But as far as that goes, like I said, it's haunting to hear this man's voice coming from the grave almost, and hear him talk about, and the metaphor he used about like reaching into the river and holding part of the river in your hand, just humanized him a little bit to me. Maybe kind of see how he was thinking. And I mean, for real, he was charismatic, and that's scary to me. I feel like I would be utterly terrified of this man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, he's the kind of person that, you know, if you came into contact with him, you know, in like a social setting, you would had no idea that of the horrible things that he was capable of doing. I mean, you would just think he's this guy and, you know, an intelligent guy, you know, yeah, it's really scary to think about. But yeah, so the police kind of get their first real lead whenever, they, like I said, they kind of had a lead, but they kind of get a break when Ted's girlfriend called police, and she was thinking that, you know, because of I think it was put out in the news that, you know, they were looking for somebody named Ted that drove the Volkswagen Bug, and she called us out. I think my boyfriend might be this person you're looking for, but the police didn't have any evidence to actually, you know, arrest him. They couldn't find any evidence, and they even brought him in a lineup because, like I said, there was eyewitnesses at the lake festival that saw these women talking to this man named Ted. And so I think they brought him in, but the witnesses couldn't exactly say. They said that Ted Bundy was not the Ted that they had seen, apparently. So they didn't have any kind of evidence to like bring him in on charges. So I mean, at this point, I know this was kind of a weird thing. He moved to Utah and he joined the Mormon church.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was pretty active in the Mormon church. It sounds like, you know, he, you know, made friends there, and even when he first got arrested, people from his church like came out in defense of him. It was, you know, like it totally blindsided everybody. And I think we saw it with John Wayne Gacy too. Like, people that were close to him, they didn't believe that he was capable of murder when he first gets arrested. You know, it's kind of one of those things where, like, people are just totally surprised. You know, that's what we find, you know, makes these serial killers so deadly, is they catch people off guard. And they're very intelligent.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, we mentioned this in the John Wayne Gacy episode too. I mean, the profile of serial killers anymore, we've learned so much from, you know, John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy alone to know what to look out for. I mean, look at the Craigslist killer. I mean, they couldn't even identify who he was until it was too late. We've seen quite a few things, and we know that with a Ted Bundy just being who he was, being able to convince people that he was more than what he really was, he was a really good liar. And I think that's where we kind of have the exception to the rule of being of the true type of character that we're looking for in a serial killer, because he really wasn't. And we go back at his childhood, according to the documentary, when he'd go to Boy Scout camp, he'd make tiger traps. He'd make tiger traps, and he'd as a prank. I mean, something's not right with you up in the head if you're doing that as a prank on somebody, especially if you're putting sharpened sticks in the bottom of a pit.
Yeah, that was hearing his childhood friend talk about that lady that was like knew him from when they were both kids. Yeah, she was talking about that. That was crazy because I think one girl actually fell into one and like kind of cut her leg or something on the spikes. It's like, wow.
Oh yeah, she had a gash all the way up her leg from her ankle up to her thigh.
Yeah.
There's other documentaries out there that have been floating around, and I mean, I don't want to go too far into them, but I mean, I even read something about when he was 3 years old. Early sign. He was 3 years old, and his cousin, he was either his aunt or his cousin, was sleeping in bed, and she awoke to being surrounded by knives all angled at her, and with him standing at the edge of the bed smiling at her.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's creepy.
It's creepy. I mean, this went from serial killer to killer kid type thing real quick.
Well, you know, one of the things about Ted Bundy that I didn't realize was the scope of his murders, like how wide of an area that he actually killed people. Like, he killed people in multiple states. And I guess that I never really knew that until I watched this documentary. It just kind of shocked me to some degree to think, I mean, and I guess back in these days, back in the 70s, they didn't have the internet. Everything was on paper. There wasn't really these databases set up to connect these crimes. So people like Ted Bundy, like serial killers, they had more freedom to go from state to state. You know, if they think they were going to get caught, they would just move to a different state and start all over again. And that's what we see. You know, we see Ted Bundy in Washington, we see him in Utah, and even later on in Colorado, and then even in Florida after that. It's just like crazy. It's like how many people, like how far he was able to get. When he lived in Utah, he actually attempted to kidnap this woman, and she actually got away. And she was able to describe him to the police and describe his car. And so they actually stopped him during a traffic stop. He was arrested during a traffic stop, and police were able to link him to that failed kidnapping. So they brought him in, and the woman actually identified him in a lineup. So they had him on the kidnapping charge. I'm trying to think. The thing is, though, like they arrested him in Colorado, I think, right?
I do believe they arrested him in Colorado, and he actually ended up escaping from Colorado. Yeah, because they had him in jail in Aspen, Colorado, and he escaped not once but twice. Just like, I mean, and the thing about it was incredibly dramatic. Apparently, it was one of those things. I think he wanted to play a game. He wanted to have more attention, right? And I mean, he even played on that. And I mean, look at some of the video of him, going between court and being transported. He's always grinning, always smiling at the camera, always being charismatic like he was. He fed off of that attention. Definitely, yeah. Like you said, he is like smiling and waving for the cameras, and he is like, it's all a show. It's all a game to him, it seems like.
But yeah, so like the first time he escapes, he actually jumps out of a 2-story window. And like, I guess, they talked about like how he was practicing jumping like in his jail cell. He was jumping from the top bunk onto the floor and kind of trying to strengthen his legs up. And, so yeah, he jumps out this 2-story window and runs off into the mountains, and everybody's freaking out, rightfully so, because like, okay, crap, where is he at? And so, they go on this manhunt, and he's just running off in the mountains, and he actually breaks into this cabin, and he's there for a couple of days. But I think he's only missing for a few days this first time he escapes, because he kind of gets like cold and hungry, so he wanders back into Aspen, and he gets caught there. He gets caught when he wanders back into town. And so like you said, this all could have just been like a stunt to kind of, get more attention. Who knows? But so they move him to like what they feel like is a more secure cell, and they have him like on, being like the first time they escaped, they gave him a lot of like leeway. Like they let him wander around the courthouse. Well, I don't think they let him wander around the whole courthouse, but they like let him like go into like this little library area unsupervised or whatever. They just like had somebody outside the door. But now they like had somebody watching him all the time because he was an escape risk. And they had him in a jail cell, and he actually like, lost a bunch of weight, and then he was able to escape through the ceiling of the jail cell, like crawl through this like opening where the light was or something, and crawl through the ceiling and escape. And he escaped it for the second time, and it's just like, people are like, what is going on? Like, how does this guy keep escaping? It's just crazy. And this time, they don't find him right away. Like, he's gone for like, man, I don't even know how long, but it was like a year or something, I think. And they don't know where he's at.
And I think it was long enough for him to commit 2 murders, right?
He was convicted of 2 murders, but I think they suspect that he killed more people. Like, cause I know that there was this other sorority house where there was like several girls killed. Yeah, so he went into the Chi Omega sorority house, and he was able to get in because there was a faulty lock on the back door. So he killed 2 people there and like attacked a 3rd woman. And then there was somebody that was coming home, so that scared Ted Bundy away, so he left before he killed the 3rd one. Oh, actually, and then he broke into another apartment 8 blocks away and attacked another student. And I guess he kidnapped a 12-year-old girl, and that's really kind of like, man, so he kidnapped this 12-year-old, and they did find her body like later on, 7 weeks later. Yeah, so for some reason I was thinking it was several, but I think he just killed 2. Well, he killed 3 people in Florida, the 2 students and the young 12-year-old girl. But he gets stopped again on another traffic stop. And he was driving a stolen car, so that tipped him off that he was not that. So they arrested him, and so they found that so they got him back again, in Florida, and they actually are able to convict him they brought him up on charges of the 2 murders because that's what they have evidence for. Because in the car they find evidence, they find his mask, and they find all these different implements that he used that linked him to the 2 murders in the sorority house. And so they have evidence. And so now the court trial starts. And this is where it gets really, it's really sad up to this point. They just like the murders and loss of life. But then this is where it gets really crazy because his court trial is televised. It's like the first televised court trial. I think, like, for me, what this would be relative to in my like growing up for me would be like the OJ trial. That one was televised, and it was like, it was a big media thing. And so I think this is kind of comparable to that, I'm suspecting. It's crazy though, like he actually takes the lead of his defense team. He like, once he fires his public defender, he says, his defense attorney is incompetent. And and so the defense attorney has to be asked to be excused from the case, and the judge says no. The judge made him stay there, and I think they had some other attorneys going to fill in for him. But like under Ted Bundy's request, his defense attorneys were like made to follow his lead. So Ted Bundy was in effect in control of his own defense, which I think that was crazy that they let him do that.
I think a lot of that's just, people falling for Ted Bundy's charm. I mean, he had so many people convinced he was innocent even before they knew who he was. He was a quote unquote celebrity.
Oh yeah,
I mean, look, and you said the comparison between O.J. Simpson and Ted Bundy. I mean, they're two totally different people, obviously, but the trials were very similar in a way. The fact that it was so televised and people wanted Ted Bundy to be innocent.
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of that with like his family and his close friends that knew him. They couldn't believe that he would do something like that. And there was even this one woman that he knew from a lifelong friend, I think, that was attending the court with his mother. She would like attend court like every day. But yeah, the court trial, it's a complete media circus. The thing that was crazy, so I mentioned this woman that was like his lifelong friend that was supporting him through all this. So he gets, the jury finds him guilty of the 2 murders. And so then when it comes to his sentencing trial, the trial where it's going to determine if he gets the death penalty or not, Ted Bundy calls to the stand this woman that's basically his girlfriend now. And I think this is really crazy. He proposes to her while she's on the witness stand. And it's like, I think he's trying to get sympathy from the jury so they won't give him the death penalty, but it doesn't work. I think it actually kind of like offends the jury to some extent, and they do give him the death penalty. They do decide that he deserves the death penalty. And I thought that was interesting. Like during this documentary, they showed the judge talking to Ted Bundy as he's being led out of the courtroom. Like after he's been sentenced to death, the judge says that he doesn't have any animosity towards Ted Bundy. He just says how he's sad about the waste of life, that Ted Bundy has been. Like, he says that, Ted, you're a bright young man. And he's like, I think you would have been a very talented attorney. He's like, just take care of yourself. He's like, he's like, seriously, I mean that. So that was just really interesting that they showed that, like showing that the judge kind of like still cared about Ted. Like, even though I think the judge kind of shows some compassion towards him, which I thought was interesting.
Well, coming from my perspective, if I were the judge in the instance, I mean, I hate to say it, but I'd feel compassion for him too. I mean, he wasted his life doing stupid things. In the instance that he was a vile human being, and by all rights, I should, hate him. But coming from a human standpoint and just being a human, you shouldn't hate somebody. You should hate what they did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and that's kind of think that's what the judge was getting at. It's like, I don't hate you as a person. I hate what you did, and what you did was bad, and you wasted your life, and I feel sorry for you.
Yeah. But I mean, also we want to, we also want to recognize that he snuffed out like at least 30 women's lives too. So I mean that's an even bigger tragedy, because these women, he at least had control of his actions. He made these choices to do these horrible things, but the women that his victims, they didn't have any choice in the matter. So that's an even bigger, tragedy that I think that we should be, recognizing.
Oh, definitely. I'm not trying to discount that at all.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make the point that the judge, by all rights, I mean, by all means, the judge was right in saying that you're a waste of life. You ruined everything that you did beforehand, and everything good that you tried to do.
Yeah. So while he's on death row, he gets these conjugal visits with his then wife. And they actually end up having a kid because I guess like the guards don't really care. They just let them have sex, and he ends up, they end up having a kid. So that's like messed up. It's like, wow, like, so what does this kid think about all this? What does this kid think about their father and their mother? And I don't know. It's just messed up to think about. You feel bad for the kid. So during this time, like during the 80s, the FBI is starting to develop profiles. They're starting to develop these profiling methods to catch other serial killers. And Ted Bundy is actually one of the people that they consult to help them create these profiles. I guess, with Ted's psychological background, he's able to help them develop these profiles. And I think that was really, really interesting to hear that. I was like, wow, like if that helps the FBI catch serial killers, I guess that's a good thing, that he did that. And I'm sure, he had his reasons, like he was wanting to gain mercy, I'm sure things like that. So yeah, I think that's totally everything he did was very self-serving.
Yeah, and I mean it's just to feed his ego.
Yeah.
I mean that's the whole reason why he did it. It's like, oh, these people need me. Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly what it was.
A couple days before his execution, he actually said he wanted to confess, and he wanted, I don't know, like a journalist to come in there and give him, like, clear his name, or not clear his name, but clear his conscience, I think, more or less. And he actually confessed to around 30 murders across several states. So I think he told them where he took some of the bodies to, so they were able to kind of get the remains back and kind of give the families some closure. But yeah, so that the last episode of this documentary, they talked about his execution, and just like, even that was a media circus. Like outside the prison, there was all these people that had come. Of course, the media was all there reporting on it, but then all these other people, just came to like, basically like, I don't know, just have a party and celebrate his execution, basically. There's people with signs, saying "Burn, Ted, burn," and like, I saw another one was like, "Have a seat, Ted," and like had an electric chair, and and they were even selling like T-shirts. There was a guy selling these little electric chair buttons you could put on your shirt. Just all these kinds of merchandise, and it was crazy. And they said that they said that whenever he was led to the electric chair, he was like pale white, ghost white, pale white. He was like terrified, and I think that like his last words, I think he did apologize for what he did. Like he tried, he said he was sorry for what he did, which really, didn't give anybody any comfort, I don't think. And I think also they said that his executioner was a female too. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I didn't remember that.
So and I guess after the execution was complete, they, they had the witnesses in there, and they left, and they were kind of like signaling to the crowd outside that it was done, and everybody started cheering, and celebrating basically. I was like, crap, it's crazy. I mean, I get it that Ted Bundy was horrible. He deserved to die. Man, it's just everybody just like celebrating his death was just kind of weird to me. It was just kind of like, I don't know, it made me feel weird, kind of watching all that. But so I guess he was cremated, and his ashes were spread out over the Cascade Mountains, which ironically was where he dumped a lot of his victims too.
I think maybe that might have been one of his requests.
Yeah.
And I think that was his way of basically saying, you didn't beat me, I still won. And the arrogance that he exudes is just, it to me, I think that's what it really was about. And the fact that when he was even going up, like you said, to the electric chair, and he apologized, I think that was another way of just saying, well, I still won. I still got what I wanted.
Well, I mean, yeah, his name is going to be, he's infamous. Like, his name is going to always be mentioned whenever there's talk about serial killers. He's going to be like, his name is going to be brought up.
Oh yeah, and I mean, like when people talk about serial killers, I mean, the first time they're going to mention it, like from my generation, now that we have this new film coming out with Zac Efron, you mention serial killers in conversation, which, I mean, that's not a normal conversation piece, right? But you mentioned serial killers in conversation. The first thing they're thinking, oh, like Ted Bundy. I mean, your generation would have been, oh, like what would you think? Like if it was your generation and somebody mentioned serial killers, who would you say would the first serial killer to come to mind would be?
I mean, yeah, probably a lot of the serial killers from the 70s, like, Zodiac, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy. Well, and even like BTK, he's like a newer one, or one that's been arrested, more recently.
Yeah, it was like between our generations.
Yeah.
Like right between when that was like one of those things like, oh, like BTK, yeah.
But I think BTK was the first one that was like came into the media like when I was like really starting to pay attention to like the news and stuff like that. I think all the other ones were like arrested and all that stuff was like all the ones from the 70s. I didn't really pay attention to. I was too young at that time. So like, BTK came out like what they arrested him in like, I want to say like the early 2000s or something, or was it the 90s? I don't even know now.
I think it was like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd have to go back. I watched a documentary on it maybe like a month ago.
But yeah, that'll be for a future episode. But that's the one that I remember. That's like the first serial killer that I was like actually like paying attention to like the arrest and the trial and all that stuff, because I was more of an adult at that point. But anyway, the last thing I want to mention about the documentary is that the last lines kind of gave me chills, because it's really scary when you think about it. But it's basically Ted Bundy, his last lines in the documentary he's saying the really scary thing is you can't identify them. People don't realize there are potential killers among them. How could anyone live in a society where people they liked, loved, lived with, worked with, and admired could the next day turn out to be the most demonic people imaginable? And so that's just kind of what the documentary leaves you with. It's like, wow, that's true.
Yeah, I'll say this though: the documentary wasn't just very well put together, and I mean, when you can end on a note like that and have create that kind of tension and that kind of feeling, I mean, it takes a lot to send chills down my back. I don't know about you, I mean, but that would really scare me. Just the idea, it's just the fact that he was right and he was talking about himself. He's like, it's like you guys didn't know this, and now what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
I mean, his whole thing. I mean, I would like to know more about him and why his particular victim set was affluential women between the ages of 17 and 25.
Well, I think they talked about that to some degree in the documentary. They talked about his first girlfriend was this, she was affluent, from an affluent background, and she kind of looked like, I think a lot of his victims kind of followed the same kind of like looks wise. They had dark hair, they were very attractive, young. So I think that was probably like the I don't know what you call it, the archetype, or the type of person that he was trying to get revenge against, because it was his first girlfriend that kind of that dumped him or whatever. But also like another thing was, one of the things that they mentioned with that might've been like a triggering event that made him like start, his killings was, he had to get his birth certificate for some reason, to get a passport or something. I can't remember now what it was, but on the birth certificate, it shows, for the father, it says unknown. And so he didn't realize that I think obviously he grew up with his mom, and I don't think he had a stepfather. I think it was just him and his mom, but I think the fact that he didn't know who his father was, I think having an unknown there where his father's name was, I think that kind of like was kind of like they described that as like a triggering event or something like that. Yeah, they mentioned that during the documentary too. So I wonder if that has something to do with him starting to kill. But I definitely think he had that first girlfriend in mind when he was like picking out his victims.
Well, I'm gonna use a phrase that was used in the documentary. I mean, the difference between the haves and the have-nots, which is what his childhood friend had mentioned in the first episode. I think that was part of it too. Was like when he met his first girlfriend, and she was affluent, she was wealthy, and she had some status. He craved that, and when that ended, he sort of fell into this ideology as I'm going to target people of this type because they remind me of my past. And I mean, it makes sense,
Yeah.
but then what doesn't make sense is I guess my question to it is, why did he do the things he did the way he did it? I don't want to get into much detail because it is graphic and the people that know what I'm talking about will understand. But why did he do the things he did in the manner he did them, and including after the murders?
Yeah. Yeah, and they kind of glossed over all that on the documentary. They did not really describe in much detail what he actually did to his victims. And I don't necessarily want to know. I mean, I have an idea, I think it, kind of goes into like necrophilia and stuff like that.
And see, that's the line I didn't want to cross and mention.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, we don't want to go. I don't think I'm comfortable going that route with this just because of how graphic it is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't. Yeah. So we'll.
We've talked about graphic things on here before, but this is just something that I draw the line with, just because it's so real.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap things up, Dakota, I think you had we thought it'd be interesting to pose a question to the audience and try to get some feedback from you guys. So
yeah, we mentioned the kind of the similarities between the O.J. Simpson trial and the Ted Bundy trial. But what would have happened if, like O.J. Simpson, he was acquitted? What if Ted Bundy would have been acquitted of these murders, the murders he was tried for, and what the backlash would have been? How we would have seen things progress to, let's say, 2019 now.
Yeah. So we'll make posts on social media like Facebook and Twitter. And just give us your thoughts on that scenario, and we will we'll read them off on the next episode. So thanks guys for checking out this episode. We hope that you are enjoying taking this walk with us through these through the serial killer stories here, through this serial killer series. And learning about these serial killers, and I know the next episode will be where we pick some movies based on Ted Bundy's life and talk about those. We have not even picked them out yet, so I'll probably make a post about that once we get closer to that episode about what movies we've initially decided on. As always, you can keep up with us on Facebook and Twitter. That's the main places where we do social media posts. We keep up with what's going on with us there. You can hit us up on email. Our email is blackcatpodcast@gmail.com. Send us your feedback, your comments, whatever on these shows. Really enjoy hearing from you guys. And Dakota, how can people contact you or keep up to date with what's going on with you?
Yeah, guys, if you guys want to email me directly, you guys can. That is dakshadowbane@gmail.com. That's DAK Shadowbane, all one word. Other than that, what I've got going on is still working on these movies with Hayden. Actually, I'm been working on some trailer type stuff. We finished our casting, and Andy here is actually providing some music for us, so we're pretty excited about that. First collaboration between all three of us, Hayden, Andy, and myself. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was really honored that you asked me to do that. So yeah, like I said, I'll be working on the score to that. I am currently working on it, so I'm really excited. This will be the first thing I've done like this, so it's really cool. Appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, no problem. And be looking forward to that link on Facebook. If you actually if you actually like and share our Facebook page, that would be greatly appreciated. Plus, whenever you see that link, it will be linking to a Kickstarter. That way we can fund some of the project a little bit, because we are right now completely self-funded on that.
Yeah, so, in addition to that, another way to help out the show is to subscribe to us and leave a review for us on iTunes or wherever you subscribe to our show at. I know there's lots of other places where people listen to our show at. There's Stitcher, there's Google Play, there's TuneIn. So wherever you listen to us, I know we got a lot of listeners out there, so we appreciate each and every one of you. Yeah, reach out to us. We'd love to interact with you guys. We want to definitely engage with you guys a little bit more than we have in the past, and get to know our listeners out there a little bit better. Dakota posed that question. We'll post it up on social media. Respond to that question. Give us your thoughts on Ted Bundy and that question, and let's have a conversation about it, and we will talk about that in our next episode. We'll share some of our feedback on that. So remember to take a closer look at the world around you, and you might just find that it is stranger and more mysterious than you thought, especially in the Black Cat Shadow.